Well, hey there, Ivan. Dave Cooper. How are you, buddy?
Doing great, Dave. Nice to join you today.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. This is awesome, man. So, you know what's cool? You're actually out of the country. Why don't you tell everybody where you're sitting and don't show them where you're at because nobody will pay attention to what we're talking about.
So, Dave, I am working hard on an island in Croatia right now, which is actually where my family is from. So I'm working on all things modular and all things academic in a fairly nice Adriatic sea environment.
I love it. I love it. Well, you can definitely tell you got a tan, and you said you've been swimming, so that's awesome. That's awesome.
It's a good work-life balance. Let's put it that way.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm glad my kids weren't in here when you showed me that picture. So, well, listen, Ivan, let's hop into it here. Why don't you give us a little bit about who Ivan Rupnik is, who ModX is, and how you got to be who you are in this offsite construction world of ours?
Well, thanks, Dave. So I'm an architect and academic, professor at Northeastern University. I've also taught at Syracuse University, at Harvard, at Rhode Island School of Design. And like many architects, I was first exposed to offsite construction as a kind of holy grail that we all expected would one day arrive and somewhat never did. But I did my doctoral work on the topic, on obstacles and solutions to offsite construction at Harvard University. And then also through that research, published some articles that got me introduced to Ryan Smith, who's also leading scholar and academic, but also consultant in the space. And Ryan and I worked together for the Modular Building Institute on helping them think about their 5 and 5 plan. And if you don't know 5 and 5, it was 2015. The goal was to grow the industry market share of offsite construction, of volumetric modular construction, to 5% in 5 years, which I'm happy to say actually did happen this year. And so we worked on a strategic plan, research, and a sort of a survey. And through that experience, which included both studying the North American market, obstacles to adoption, but also to best practices abroad, we formed what we call a knowledge exchange platform, or ModX. So that's been, we've been working as ModX for about 2 years. And so ModX is, again, a knowledge exchange platform. We try to bring people in the industry together, very much like you do. We offer what we call exchanges, which are sort of deep dives into what we call mature modular markets. So we've taken people to Japan. We've taken people to parts of the US that we think are very innovative. And we were planning to take people to Sweden at this time of year, which unfortunately we won't be able to do this summer, but we'll be doing a webinar around that topic this week. So that's just a little bit about my journey to and through modular and offsite construction.
Sure. And we'll put that information for that webinar because it is a free webinar, you said. So we'll put that at the end here for everybody to have access to, because I think that would be great to see what's happening overseas. So you're really big into research, the academia side of this, and you spend a lot of time helping others research and study what's happening in offsite, what's happening in the market, not only here in the United States, but also globally. Can you tell us a little bit, in your mind, with all this academia and the research, how do we get this information to fall in the right ears?
Well, that's a great question. So that's why Ryan and myself were so happy to work with MBI. We were publishing articles for 20 years, and I'm sure a few people read them, and that we did well. We taught some students, we taught some architects, but they weren't falling in the right ears. And so we've actually seen a big uptick in kind of convergence between the knowledge that's already been out. It's already out there. There's a lot of very smart people that have done a number of very smart things, and then there's an industry and there's a need for quality housing and other kinds of other improvements in the built environment. And so really what we've been trying to do is kind of bring together those two worlds, the world of research and academia, and also a kind of neutral perspective, a tough love, as we like to call it, to the offsite industry. So we don't, as much as we really think offsite's great, we try to keep a distance as academics do. But we've also broken through. We've decided that we've published enough papers, and what we try to do is build a kind of cycle where the information that people need is out there. And we're not the only ones. There's a number of people doing it, and we're also happy to see. Again, we're in leaps and bounds in terms of getting the knowledge to the people that need it.
Sure, sure. So, one of the things we were talking a little bit off screen, who are the people that can help accelerate the adoption of offsite construction? I think there's all this research, like you said, bringing the academics together with the actual practitioners in the industry. But I think there's even more than that. There's the people that aren't practicing yet that don't really understand the value, don't understand the research behind it, think it's too expensive. And in maybe some cases it is, but who are the right people in the United States here that can help accelerate the adoption of what we're doing in offsite construction?
Well, one anecdote we always like to tell is we started working with MBI, I don't know, in 2016, 2017, and the world changed when the first McKinsey report came out. So the McKinsey report on construction, not really on offsite construction, on the problems in conventional construction. And I bring that up because once that report came up, it was picked up by The Economist and by other newspapers, and what we saw as in terms of acceleration was a change in who talked about offsite. So all of a sudden, big tech companies who were not interested at all in construction decided that construction was the next thing. We saw, so that's some of the acceleration we've seen is coming from who has the money. Follow the money. The money's in Silicon Valley. We've also seen another big change, and we think we're trying to make those companies more comfortable. Is the building products industry has a manufacturing culture already. It has an R&D culture. It has deep pockets compared to any construction company. Yeah. And they have been servicing and serving the conventional construction industry. And once the tech companies, once McKinsey said, hey, there's a change coming, we saw that those companies are changing. And then again, most recently, we've seen HUD, who has had a big impact in the manufactured housing industry since the 70s, take notice and say, you know what, housing in general, particularly housing, could really change if we started to look at some of these other solutions that have been developed, particularly two-dimensional and three-dimensional modular construction. So there's, again, another, and just one more example too is Dwell Magazine. From purely taste-making perspective, wow, they've changed the game too. So there's a number of people accelerating it, and really, it's how do we get those synergies built? Is I think that it's a nice problem to have. It's not a problem we had 5 years ago.
Sure. So so a lot of outside industry people are coming in. And like you said, the tech companies are now starting to look at it. We've got all kinds of people developing softwares for production line use and, from end-to-end users for offsite construction. But what about as far as adoption, even in our own industry, of the new technology that's happening? Because we're already doing offsite construction. It's not like it doesn't exist, but we're not doing it to the same level that the rest of the world's doing it.
Yeah, no, I think that's the tough love. So Ryan and I, we love modular construction. So before I say what I'm going to say, it's tough love. But what we're surprised about is, yes, building in a factory is industrialized construction. It is offsite construction. It's not on site, and it is more efficient because it's a controlled environment. But the kinds of improvements we've seen abroad, and we've seen in some companies in the U.S., really come from a manufacturing culture. And that manufacturing culture comes from a kind of different approach to not just technology, but to data, but to continual improvement. So whether you're making a car or an iPhone, they are different from buildings, but what they all share is a data-rich environment where everything you do is data is the actual material of industry more than widgets or materials. And so that's the step between all the great software and hardware that people have developed, and the fact that the U.S. actually has the largest offsite industry by volume in the world. We do, not the largest market share. The big gap that we've seen and we've tried to change, and we've seen others try to change too, is that first step. So we've seen companies like Bensonwood, for example, in New Hampshire. We've seen companies like Connect Homes recently, before they even made investments in technology, in new software, in new hardware. They changed their relationship. Every piece of information, even things you don't think are important, started to be tracked. And we keep finding that seems to be the magic shift. And it's something that doesn't seem, it's a pain in the butt. It's not the way we usually do things. We take it for granted. We assume that it's not important, and yet it is. It's what makes it, what changes some of these more successful companies. And it is what even a company that doesn't use a lot of automation, it's where we see that improvement.
Sure. Well, listen, data is everything. I mean, if you look at every successful company that is out there, Fortune 500 or above, they look at every piece of data they have. I mean, there's companies out there that can tell you exactly what magazine I'd like to read, and I don't even know who that company is, right? They track all of that. So I think it's a super important thing that we start looking at the data. We start looking at how we're tracking from everything from acquiring consumers all the way through the production line to the end result, to customer satisfaction. And there are some companies that are doing that for sure. Sure. So listen, if you're joining us right now, it would be very interesting to hear, what do you think is holding back offsite construction in the United States right now? What do you think needs to change for offsite construction in the United States? So Ivan, guess what? We're live on 3 channels. We're live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, all at the same time right now. So don't get camera shy. It's
That's
okay.
Crazy.
How much fun is that? So if you're just tuning in, please like and share. Please ask us questions. This is going to be a collaborative conversation with us and the audience, should you have some questions. All right, Ivan, you mentioned a couple things, and one of the things that's real tricky globally and here in the States is the vocabulary of offsite construction. Why don't we talk a little bit about what the vocabulary of offsite construction means? Because we have industrialized construction, we have offsite construction, we have modular, volumetric, factory built, and I should be adding panelized up here. Yeah. That's part of it. And then there's SIPs, concrete. There's all kinds that go into this. That's
right. And so, well, I was going to say it's hard to know which terms are the right terms, but we need to have common terms. I'm an academic. I care about terms, but I actually don't care. Let's just pick a term and stick with it. Right. I think one of the issues, for example, I'm sure for manufacturers that they run into it in terms of how we inspect modular construction or offsite construction is, if we don't agree on terminology, this industry will not grow. So some of the key concepts. I mean, we like to use the term offsite construction in our work simply because McKinsey put it in their report. And if McKinsey put it in the report, the folks that have the resources to move the industry forward have read that report. They haven't read that report. Other reports maybe. Maybe they've never heard of the term factory built, even though factory built appears in a lot of regulatory language. So can we get factory built and offsite to be one and the same? Also, something like modular construction. Why do we call it modular? Well, because modular construction means that a building has been designed before it's been designed for manufacturing. It is not a product; it's actually a process. So some of those terms mean something in an important way. Some of those terms, again, have some of the things we do in this industry have at least 2 terms, and we don't have enough time in this conversation to get through it. But we've got it. It's a simple but important step, is that as an industry, we need to clarify those terms. And again, I would say I didn't come up with these, so I will tout them. I find the terminology that the McKinsey reports use, well, for better or for worse, it's something that, again, Silicon Valley, others, the finance sector is starting to use. So we'll start using those. Let's start using those, and let's clean up some of the other terminology.
Yeah, for sure. Agree. Well, I just saw a post recently, people asking about the terminology and what words should we call offsite construction. I find it interesting. You kind of are saying the same thing, where there is a lot of confusion around what it really, really does mean. I often wonder, though, we start changing terminology again now. Does it add more confusion to something that's finally starting to get some clarity?
Well, that's why, again, no, you're totally right, but that's why I do think, again, the industry internally has its own terminology, the regulatory framework has its own terminology, and now the movers and shakers of the world, the tech companies, have a third terminology. It's painful because we do have 3 or 4 terminologies running around. That is a major obstacle. If we don't solve that, all the successes that you're going to see. And also, there's a bit of, so in Japan, for example, there's an association of they still use the word prefabrication, another term. We didn't even put it up there because it's another one, but they just panelize. So 1D, so kit of parts, basically 2D or panelized, and 3D volumetric. They are like MBI, and they work together and they lobby, and that's been very successful for them. And they have pretty standardized terminology, and that's helped them with financing, with insurance, with the regulatory issues. So whatever it is, I get we've made progress. So Dwell has made prefab not a bad word. HUD still uses factory built. Offsite is not popular, but it's true. Like right now we have terminology, but we got to pick one. I don't really care at this point. We just got to pick one.
I'm actually going to put that up on the screen. What should we call our industry? Let's see if I'm sure we'll get some interesting comments on this. What should we call our industry?
Well, and who should be part of that industry? Because I think it's a little, for example, in the McKinsey report, they compare, in the most recent McKinsey report, they compare apples to oranges. They compare industry, they compare Ireland or UK, where you have a lot of panelizers, and then they compare, but then in the US, they only put volumetric, they don't put manufactured housing. Manufactured housing is a form of offsite construction. It's not necessarily 3D volumetric.
Yeah.
But when we don't count those things, even if they are different qualities and different codes, sometimes we hurt the industry by not showing what is double-digit market penetration. So it's, again, those terms are key, and everyone's a little bit worried before because we didn't want to be associated with a negative term. Now, because some terms have more positive cachet than others, but it really is. It's a simple but important step in really overcoming these obstacles.
Yeah, so you mentioned the McKinsey report, and that's kind of what everybody puts their eye on here in our industry. And the recent McKinsey report was very heavily in favor of offsite construction and the growth and where it's headed. I had a conversation recently with the MMC and those guys, and with Jerry McCaughey, and Jerry actually brought up, all right, well, the McKinsey report's really, really nice, but nobody's really taken it down to show how it affects production builders in their pocket. Nobody's taken it and really zeroed it down. They've just they broad stroked it. Has anybody, and I might as well ask you, do you know of anybody that really has gone through the numbers with a fine-tooth comb that could sit there and say, this is what it will save you, just like you say with the data. This is how it's going to change the way you do business.
Well, the kind of the core of business management and the core of industrial management is that the data is produced in the production space. And so we can't, so as an academic, I'd love to work with a factory and get their data. So we don't have good data because we don't, that's another obstacle we have in the US, is that we don't have a culture of sharing. This sounds very touchy-feely, but we need to share. Right now, there's nothing anyone has that's IP that is that radical from anyone else. I think people are a little bit shy about the fact that they're not producing as many mods or boxes or panels as they say they are. Maybe that's another reason why they don't want to share their data. But right now, if somebody comes into a factory for a couple of weeks or a month, that's not going to work. You to get the kind of data that Jerry might be talking about, that's the kind of continual improvement that comes from years. And so, but what McKinsey did, just to be clear, is that they didn't say offsite was the solution. They pointed out the problems in construction, the productivity problems in construction, and they said, well, maybe offsite is a problem because construction is. That was the value of that report, is that's where everybody turned around and said it wasn't so much, we still have to prove, we all tough lovers of offsite construction, we have to prove, no one's proven it. I mean, we know it's possible, we know it addresses those issues. The only way you can prove that is through continual improvement, and it'll take time. And as researchers, we can point to those examples, but really companies need to track that data, and they need to make a case for why do they have a factory, why are they investing or not investing in automation, why did they buy that piece of software. That's just the name of the game. That is what it means to be industrialized. It doesn't just mean having a roof over your head as a construction site.
Sure. Well, you're going to have me pulling out my soapbox, Ivan, because it drives me absolutely nuts, because you hit the nail on the head, no pun intended, about everybody keeping what they have close to their vest, right? In other words, nobody has the secret sauce. If we did, we wouldn't be only 4 to 5% of the entire market. That's kind of my big thing. If our industry would get their heads out of there, and come together and share information and really collaborate to grow, I think we could start collecting data. We could start moving the industry forward, because nobody does have the secret sauce yet. I mean, there may be some behind the scenes guys, which I know there are some big things happening, but I don't know. Not when you're 4 or 5% of the market.
Yeah, and I think like one topic that I've always enjoyed arguing with folks about is bigger is better. For example, the belief that big mods are, there's less seams, they're faster trips. Well, you look at other markets, who have a lot more data. And yes, they have smaller trucks. Every the US is unique. We have big roads, we have big trucks, but there's other factors, for example, like the size of tools, there's all kinds of factors that say, well, maybe bigger isn't always better in volumetric modular. And I'm open to believing that but for example, that's something that's a very tangible presupposition that we have in the modular industry. There's plenty of them that no one really has good data on, or everybody just says that's how we do it, and it's word for us, and then we kind of backfill those arguments. But that's something we've seen again across the board, and we're seeing that, for example, that's a case study we've seen in urban areas, at least. All of a sudden it's the logistics of craning in a smaller mod that pushes a smaller mod, but then it turns out there's other benefits to it. So that's just one of many, but we need the data, and we can help understand and bring that data together, but we need that culture of data in the factories, or we can't call ourselves an industrialized industry. We're pre-industrial then, basically. If we're not collecting data, even if we're using tools, even if you're using some automation, even if you're putting it in a factory, that's not really what makes car manufacturers tick. It's not the robots.
Sure. Well, let's hop into that then. Design for assembly is a big term right now, right? Why don't we talk a little bit about that, the collaboration and the digital tools that you're starting to see in the industry? Europe seems to have a head start on this, but maybe you'll correct me on that.
No, I mean, I think, again, just like data, another step in the process is vertical integration. So modular construction is not, you're not mass producing cars, and it's not even like the manufactured housing industry, which pretty much has a standard product that you can tweak. We are at modular construction, and it can be very efficient, right? Whether it's panelized or volumetric, it's still doing one project at a time. It's the sub-assemblies that are very efficient. I say that because if the industry is promising that we can modularize a project once it's already been drawn, we're never going to see those savings. So the relationship between designers, owners, developers, manufacturers, and obviously subs in the field, the people assembling it, that all needs to be synergized. And again, yes, software helps, the technology helps, you need it. But if you don't change that culture, if there's not a kind of synergy between the architect, the engineer, the owner, the manufacturer, and if we're not thinking about assembly at the same time we're thinking about unit types, at the same time we're thinking about the mod size of the floor, we're not going to see those benefits. And we're not going to also see the benefits of software. Software, even BIM, is not going to solve that problem for you. Sorry, it's not. I mean, you can buy Revit if you're a developer, or if you tell your developer that you can build anything. Yes, you can, but not if it's already been drawn. You can, but you're going to throw away all those hours of work.
Yeah, right.
And we're surprised to see that across the board in a very mature industry like the US, where we've had modular construction for a long time, that manufacturers, and I think I know why. I mean, you want the work, I get it, but telling someone you can build anything when they already have a set of drawings that don't work for your line, it's not helping you, and it's not helping the industry.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. Why don't we give a couple quick shout outs to some people that we have on right now? We have Jenny Kelleher joining us from Fredericton, Canada. Thank you for joining us today. Hey, Mark Bill. On BS Friday, this guy's called Mark Bare Naked Willie, just so you know. So always good to see you, Mark. We got Dennis Staggerwalt from Housing Innovation Alliance saying hello today. We have Rick Hawkins from Atlanta, Georgia joining us. This LinkedIn user from New Jersey did not pop up with the name. Is that Anthony possibly? Who is it? Timothy Brown. I don't know why your name didn't pop up there, Timothy, but thank you for joining us today. We have George Ryman. Good morning from Phoenix, Arizona. I guess it's not real hot in Phoenix today, George. You didn't say hot Phoenix, Arizona today. George wrote, it's a perception issue. Once we start publishing and highlighting our successes and the profit potential, many more builders will jump on the offsite bandwagon. What's your take on that, Ivan? You agree?
Well, I've seen some examples of, again, I've started using that word tough love. I mean, I think we all know that offsite construction makes sense. We all know it really does. It's a no-brainer. There's a logic to doing it this way. But I think we really have to be, at the one hand, we have to promote it, but on the other hand, we have to be critical about what we're saying and the promises we're making and what we're promising. So, for example, in Japan, very mature industry, they started off with cheaper and faster, and it didn't work. And they shifted to higher quality and predictable. And now consumers are willing to pay an 8%, let's say on average, premium for an offsite product because you get it on time, it's seismic proof, and it's higher quality. So I think we need to get the message out there, but I think we have to be critical, and we have to find out what it is that we really do well. And then again, in a market as big as the U.S. or in North America in general, I think modular can answer different problems for different people in different markets, and it's the same modular, it's the same approach. But that's something that was there was a really good workshop that some folks in Minnesota, the Construction Revolution Summit in the fall, and they had a morning session which was really informative, and an afternoon session which was workshopping with inspectors, with local industry at the state scale. And what we found out was that it was just about there was people that had problems that modular could solve, that those folks and those industries weren't put together. And once they were at the table, all kinds of synergies came out. So that's why I think we should emphasize those positive examples, but I think we should be clear about what we're doing and make sure that we can deliver on those promises.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for the question, George. I think you know this guy, Brent Musson.
Hey,
building indoors is not a major leap forward as the industry thinks it is until Alejio Goldratt, I don't know how to say it. I think is it Henry Nat, and I believe the last one, Henry Ford, are household names to us. We can't claim to be manufacturers.
Right. So Brent is giving Brent, who's a good friend and colleague, is reminding us that we need to know a little bit more about management too. So these are heroes to me and to Brent, and to maybe other people that are interested in their management wonks. But that idea of really being able to, whether you're doing it on paper or in a computer, really thinking through a process up front. That's what design for manufacturing doesn't just mean designing for your box. Yep. It really means thinking through what all of those steps up front, then you really do see savings. You do see and not just savings, but you see the kind of predictability that really is that we've noticed in almost every other market is whether the price is less or the same. Certainly, hopefully not more. Whether the price is the same, what people really come back to for offsite construction is predictability. Predictability and control. So. In Japan, if you walk into a dealership for a single-family modular home, you can have a house within 3 months to that date, and so it's just for that consumer, that is worth an 8% premium.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, so there you have it. You bring predictability in, you collect the data, you control the process from front to end, you research the daylights out of it to figure where the value and the time savings are and where you're wasting. You only get that by collecting the data.
Yeah.
And you can do, like you just said, like they're doing over in Japan.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to do one quick shout out here real quick, and then we're going to go back and jump back in, and we'll come back to everybody else's comments here in a few minutes. Jerry McCullough, hello from Pittsburgh. Well, hello, Jerry. Thank you for joining us today. All right. So where did we leave off? Let me go back in here and just see. All right. So we talked about design for assembly, collaboration, digital tools. Let's talk about global successes, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, even yourself, you are in another country enjoying life during COVID, but you're doing a ton of research over there with these manufacturers from all over the world. Who right now has eyes on America to do more business here?
Well, again, we've seen two modular companies from Poland really revolutionize the hospitality industry, Polcom and DMD. And that, again, interestingly enough, folks that if you walked into those factories, they're very smart, they're very well organized. I wouldn't say there was high automation, but it was really understanding the supply chain, the management system, and also quote unquote design, how that comes together. So those, we've seen, again, China, there's Citizen M, which was using Polish modular producers. Polcom now has shifted to China. So there's obviously China's a big player in terms of production. But then also we've seen who has eyes on America, places like Sweden and Japan, which we've studied, very mature industries. They've had eyes on America since the 70s. In fact, they saw some of the things we were doing that were very innovative in the 70s, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of regulation, in terms of project delivery. They took those lessons and they ran with them. And in fact, we've learned a lot more about the US and some of the things that worked through the eyes of the Japanese and the Swedes than we've learned through the industry, so the U.S. industry. So we've always been surprised at some of the success stories. Even we might be critical of some of the quality of manufactured housing as opposed to modular housing, but the fact that the HUD code housing delivered a certain product at a certain price point to people that really needed it and was able to achieve double-digit market share is something that in the modular industry we really should take more. And some folks in the modular industry came from that industry and don't like to talk about that history. I understand why, but that history it's an important case study for understanding. So a lot of folks have an eye on our market, but also people have learned, taken case studies from us that we have not learned from to the level that we should, and we're trying to change that.
Yeah. I mean, just so there are people tuning in that don't know, Evelina from DMD Modular, she's the CEO over there, and I love that. And she's a great person. But they're building the tallest Marriott hotel, I think it's in the world, and
tallest hotel in the world,
downtown Manhattan, and they're shipping it from Poland. I mean, that's a sign that hey, we are in a global economy, even in offsite construction.
18 stories of one of the Citizen M's was shipped from southern Poland across the North Sea to the Bowery because even Citizen M wanted to but couldn't find the capacity and capability that they needed in the U.S. industry, and would have loved to work with a U.S. manufacturer if that had been there.
Right. So Ivan, let's talk. We kind of talked about who has eyes on America. Let's talk about what lessons can we learn from abroad. I mean, is there something that as a manufacturing, or industrialized manufacturing or becoming an industrialized offsite manufacturing, country, is there stuff we can learn?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, one secret, and again, it takes time to build up because of the kind of the transformation of culture. So, all due respect to everyone, I don't own a manufacturing facility. I know it's stressful. I know it's tough, and so I really appreciate what everyone's doing out there. What we've seen to be able to scale up, in Japan, the biggest volumetric modular company was bankrolled by a plastics company for 10 years. It was losing money for 10 years in the 70s. But guess what? They figured out they worked on it. They figured out their standards, and they've been making a heck of a lot of money, double-digit profits since the 80s. So for 30 years or more. In Sweden, we've seen that with the forestry sector. So big forestry products companies were able to support that kind of R&D phase of kind of research. IKEA has we all know IKEA. IKEA has a modular company in Sweden. They helped bankroll their first 10 years of kind of start. So yes, we all know there's ups and downs. So they were able to bring that manufacturing culture in Poland. Both Polcom and DMD are subsidiaries of larger furniture companies. So I mean, I think those relationships between somebody upstream in the supply chain, whether it's a buildings products company, whether it's a furniture company, that has that kind of different cash flow, I think it's key. In the U.S., we've seen that with developer-driven modular manufacturers, but I don't think developers have the depth of pockets that these kind of products manufacturers do. So that's just one. I also think, again, Evelina is a researcher and academic, as well as an industry leader and a manufacturer and an architect. In Sweden, we saw Lindbäcks, one of the biggest volumetric companies. Their head engineers, Helena Lidlow, is also a professor. So those links with academia really help, not because academia has all the answers, but because there's academia also learns a lot from industry. And then the public-private relationships in all those cases, and including the U.S. So in Japan, there's the trade association there has a really good relationship with the equivalent of like their HUD or the Ministry of Construction in Sweden. But these programs, just to be clear, also they're not publicly subsidized. They have less subsidies than some of our than agriculture does in the U.S. By the way, these are private companies that have developed the right relationships and have learned the right language to appeal to politicians, job creation, sustainability, different kinds of resilience. Those are things that have also, so there is a lot to learn, and those countries have learned a lot from us. So even learning about things we don't appreciate in our own recent history of industrialized building in the U.S. Ryan and I, through Mount X, we've learned a lot more about the U.S. from talking to folks in Japan and Sweden than we often have through our own research here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the value between you and Ryan. I mean, you just have that global knowledge versus, what's happening in Pennsylvania or what's happening in Midwest. But what I'm hearing is it's about the collaboration. There seems to be a lot more collaboration between educational agencies, government agencies, the manufacturers, and how to truly kind of solve maybe problems that are out there and what they need to do to get to those problems. And I know even some countries have written, hey, you need to start going in this way. There's some countries that have said that, offsite is the future and we need to start looking at it. And I think we could use a little bit of that here. Less government, as I know most people want, but there are some things.
Well, the right kind of
the right kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, the right kind of government. I love it. All right. So next question then. How should HUD have more active role in the growth of offsite construction in this country? This is something that when we spoke prior to hopping on here, you mentioned that this is they were looking at that here and looking at this here in this country. What's your take on HUD being a solution or a provider or not a solution to the offsite construction world?
Well, again, the trailer home industry existed before the HUD code of the mid 70s, and HUD code actually really improved the quality and the predictability of the delivery of that product, and that product filled a very particular niche in the market. And so HUD, and this is actually a question I'm asking the community here, is HUD is looking at offsite construction more broadly. I'm trying to encourage them through the example of folks like Sweden and Japan who looked at HUD and looked at the success of HUD code as a way of taking an existing industry and actually improving its quality and lowering its costs at the same time. I know the listeners are deeply involved in the industry and have a lot more knowledge than than I do in the day-to-day of operation. So what can HUD do to move the volumetric modular panelized industry forward?
Right.
That's just an open question. Love to hear from folks on the line.
Yeah, no, that is a great question. I mean, there's we talked a little bit about this whole cross mod thing that's happening within the HUD code, and that's not what you're talking about at all. And I understand that. So when people hear the HUD thing coming up in the industry, a lot of people automatically start going to that, at least here in the States or, in the tried and true modular world. So I do think it's a great question. How can the government, HUD help us move this forward? Can they put their weight behind some of these issues and help make change that's for the better? I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch. It'll be interesting to follow up with you on that as well, Ivan. I'd like to learn more about that because I'm sure you're following that as well. Mm-hmm. For sure. All right. So we're going to jump back over here into the comments and let's do some more. So we have Rick Hawkins. This one's going to cover your face, Ivan, so don't take it personal. Yeah. The West Coast factories seem to be focused on standardized module offerings for production efficiency, while the East Coast factories deal with more custom one-off designs. Do you see or hear discussions about changing the focus in the East? Are there lessons learned from the HUD National Code for mass production?
That's a great topic. I think the relationship between standardization and customization is not well understood. It's the last step in that process. If we don't have data about our production and we don't have vertical integration, we can't even decide what constitutes standardization and what constitutes customer customization. So I don't think we really even fully understand it. I think in single family, we might. So for example, I don't have an answer, but I have an example. What Katerra has been working on, for example, is in their 3-story garden apartment is a pretty interesting model for all of us to think about, which is a highly standardized, highly customizable product. It's a panelized system. It's not a volumetric system, but it's one that looks at what to standardize and what to leave flexible based on customer inputs. So if we don't know what to standardize and what to leave custom if we don't collect data, if we don't collect inputs, if we don't know. Right now, we're speculating on what the market wants. We're speculating on how people want to live, how people want the projects delivered. And I'm not sure if the West Coast East Coast division. I've seen highly customized projects in the West Coast, and I've seen a lot of standardization in the East Coast. But I haven't really seen true customization or true standardization in many of the platforms. I've seen a lot of folks take a one-off plan and try to make it work with their factory layout. That's not customization, and that's not standardization. That's an expensive mess.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Joel Hutchins. Finally, someone speaking some sense here. I don't know if he's talking about you or me, Ivan, but I'm going to take it. Love it. Thanks, Joel. All right, we have Jenny Kelly here. Do you know Jenny from Rise? Hi, Ivan. Jenny from Rise here. I love the idea of the industry growing through data sharing and collaboration. What might that look like? To what degree is our competitive mindset holding us back? That's a great question.
Well, I don't, again, we can't compete unless we understand what factors we're competing on. So that is another, again, tough love. That's another misnomer. Not to Jenny. I think the point's great. Is that for us to really be competitive, like athletes, we want to know what we're competing around. So we need some data sets. We need some standards before we can actually truly start to compete. So we see that. Again, we've seen that in places like Japan, and once they or Sweden actually. Once Sweden's industry standardized, it actually became more competitive, actually. And customers got to really have three choices, at least, for a particular product. In a small country like Sweden, we don't even have, in many markets, we don't have three choices for multifamily, for hospitality. We might have three choices if we want to go on offsite. So I think we can become more competitive. I think it's healthy obviously it's great. The industry wants to be more competitive. Right. I don't think not sharing, not being open about what your production is, not being open about the fact that most of our details, especially in the lightwood side, maybe the steel is a little different, but in the lightwood side, we all know that the details are pretty similar. There's some secret sauce in one factory or another, but how do we even know that's really unique until we compare it to other approaches?
Yeah, right. It's all in the data.
Yeah.
Todd Buerther. Hey, Todd. Yeah. Greetings, friends. Ivan, with your experience educating next generation designers, how should we empower IDEO-like component scale design for modular to complement our current unit scale first architecture approach?
Well, yeah, that's a great point, Todd. And I don't know if Todd's question makes sense to folks outside of architecture, academia / vertical integration, but put it in a simpler way, when I teach students in architecture school, they always assume that modular construction means micro units. So it means that a unit, a housing unit, or a other kind of, and so I think that's a good question. I think, and that also comes into the industry where we think big box. We want to put 2 units in a big box, or we want to put a corridor. I think we need to just understand better what the value proposition is and what the value proposition is of our component. Are we talking about boxes? Are we talking about panels? I always one example. So in Sweden and Japan, again, the 2 industries we've studied a lot. All volumetric modular is actually built up of panels. So the subassembly is actually the module, not the volume. So volumes, and what does that do? It allows you to compare across the industry. It allows for compatibility between panelized manufacturers and volumetric manufacturers. It allows for flexibility in terms of layout, and factories, but also in terms of layout of actual finished structures. So I think especially in volumetric, the idea of the volume as always being the key subassembly is maybe a conceptual obstacle as well. And again, I think understanding that next level down. And that's, again, something you'll see that in the second McKinsey report. They talk about a 2.5D modular as something between panelized and volumetric. Well, we've seen that across the world. Everyone else sees panelized as the stepping stone. We like to work with the chassis, and that comes from the manufactured housing industry. That no one can tell me differently. And it has its advantages. And obviously, a volume leaving a factory has its advantages, huge advantages. We know that in terms of finishing. But in terms of the way we organize manufacturing and the way we design structures, this next scale down, maybe the panel, maybe that's the right scale, that could be a big factor in moving the industry forward.
Great. Well, that was a great question. All right. Rick Hawkins has another question, or maybe it's even a comment. Haven't read it yet. One of the advantages for the rest of the world is the public acceptance of smaller, more efficient living space versus the demand for homes that are averaging over 2,200 square feet in size. It's interesting that even millennial renters moving from 1,100 square foot apartments to single family want 1,800 square foot or more.
Well, and that's also, that's been coming up, and that was coming up before COVID. And right. Now there's all kinds of questions about how we're going to be living in the future, although now the suburbs have COVID and before it was the cities. So that was a little bit of a short-term solution. But it's true that I think, yes, there are other parts of the world that are more comfortable in living in smaller environments. On the other hand, I've helped European architects set up practices in the US, and they're surprised how small our urban apartments are. So while we have really big houses that might be very inefficient, we have really small, we design housing in cities, even in mid-rise housing, and that's actually very small by even some Asian countries, and certainly by all of Europe and Latin America. So we are actually relatively new, not just to offsite construction, but to the kind of even low and mid-rise multifamily that now cities across, not just the big cities, but mid-sized cities are developing. So I think I think it's also a good opportunity for the industry to rebrand itself around kind of a mid-rise, maybe condo, which is different from what's out. That's the kind of associations with the garden apartment or associations with the kind of luxury housing. The sort of meat of the built environment is up for grabs. And I think the industry could be more proactive, not just in manufacturing, but in housing types. I think there's a real opportunity right now to rethink those things. And why shouldn't modular industry be active not just in manufacturing, but in the actual product itself?
Sure. Good answer. All right. So one of the
questions, good questions, guys. This is really good.
These are good questions. So one of the things we put out there earlier was, what can HUD do? Well, we had two questions, right? We had what do people think HUD could do to help the offsite construction industry, or shouldn't they, or should they be involved in the offsite construction industry? You could just say yes or no. Should HUD be involved in offsite construction? I think that would be a pretty powerful signal. So whether we get to you today, or we'll definitely get to you in the answers afterwards if we don't get that in. We did have Brent did make a comment on HUD. HUD could impose a real property national code as a complement to its regulation of chattel housing. Yeah,
yep.
For sure. All right.
That's what happened in Japan. Yep.
That's what happened in Japan?
Yep.
See, the rest of the world wouldn't have known that, Ivan. This is what makes you so special, man. I love it. I wouldn't have known that. All right. The other question was, what should we call our industry? Keep it clean, please. What should we call our industry? Offsite construction. Should we change it? Should we not change it? This was a question I think even some people have put out, I've seen on social media lately. And if we do change it, does it just compound the confusion even more? That's the other question. So, all right. Ivan, can you believe we're almost at 50 minutes?
It's gone by really fast.
We're gonna get through a couple more of these comments real quick. Mark Bare Naked Willie said, thank you for the input. Ivan, data and tech are great assets. Our industry can thrive from within and support one another. 100% agree with that. Brent made another comment regarding lack of transparency. Google the prisoner's dilemma. Somebody's gonna have to explain that one to me.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, but I think that, again, the point is that. Well, anyway, I think the point is I think we're all afraid of sharing information that actually would liberate us in a way. I think that's at least the way I read it.
Well, why don't we keep, Brent, I had an opportunity to talk to him earlier this week, and it's super smart guy doing really cool stuff on the West Coast out in LA, East LA, I think is what he said. We're going to have
South LA.
So sorry, Brent, you can beat me up on the live show. But we're going to have Brent on. We're going to talk about what he's doing, and it's actually quite amazing what he's doing and how he's thinking of how he's building offsite construction. All right, a couple more comments, and then I think we're going to be moving on. Andrew Seeley, yes, HUD. Okay, yes. Thank you, Andrew. Rick Hawkins, thanks for the discussion input. You're welcome. Etienne Guba. Hey, Etienne, nice to see you. So Etienne is the CEO of SIGA North America. Ivan, if you don't know him, super fun guy to talk to. And they've been in the offsite industry in Europe for a long time. So he might be somebody that you guys should be talking with. But thank you, Ivan, for sharing your story and experience. I am a big believer in data-driven decision-making. Key will be that the offsite manufacturers share their data. From your experience, why is it so hard to get the industry to collaborate without being afraid of giving away competitive advantages?
Well, I mean, I think we need to develop. There are certainly things that obviously everyone wants to keep close to their vest, and that's fine. But I do think, and again, my experience has been that folks don't want to share I think you have to be comfortable with sharing your successes and your failures. The data does tell us stories of both. But yeah, I mean, I think if we want to grow, we really need to share that. And again, as a number of smart people that I get to talk to fairly frequently say, the big competitor isn't other offsite manufacturers or builders, it's the conventional construction industry.
Right.
And actually, even they're not really competitors because they can't even keep up with the demand that we all need. So, yeah, I think we all have a lot. I think we would all benefit, and there'd be more work for everyone if we learn how to share share, but also to share, you got to have something good to share. So collect that data first and know how to process it as well.
So here's something, and before we get to a couple more, and then we'll wrap up. But collect data. That might just be such a foreign understanding of, like, where do you start, right there? I mean, so there's a factory out there and they say, all right, we hear you loud and clear. I wouldn't even know where to begin to collect data, or how I track data, or where to start collecting data. Do you guys have resources, or, I mean, that's something you help people with, right?
We do. That's something we've done in the past, and we're happy to point to those, but we're also happy to point to success stories. And so again, we've seen Bensonwood in New Hampshire do that. So they worked with some European manufacturers, not on technology, not on collaboration, on just what kind of information they should be tracking. And they did it first in an analog way, and then they moved to a more digital platform.
Right.
And they've had real success in dollars and cents. And we've seen that on the West Coast very recently. I was right before everything shut down, like actually right when it was shutting down, I was visiting my good friend Gordon Stott at Connect Homes in LA. And they were set up. Again, I felt like I was in Sweden in all in the best possible way. There wasn't any meatballs on the table, but it was just again, analog, smart tracking of all kinds of information and all processing of all kinds of information. So we've seen that. I've seen that. Those are companies out there that would be happy to share. ModX is happy to provide assistance in that as well. But it's key, and I think it's really important. And it doesn't require any investment. It doesn't require time. It does require dedication. You can do it on a letter-sized sheet of paper, and there's lots of information out there, and there's lots of folks that are doing it. But again, before you invest in certainly, I think automation is important. I think software is important. I think vertical integration is important. But if you don't understand what you're doing, it's going to be very hard to bring those technologies alone are not going to solve your problems.
Yeah. So how do we make a roadmap to help people figure this out so they don't have to sit there confused? You know, just like what you're saying, you have all this data. I think it'd be a very cool seminar, very cool to do live one day.
That's a good point.
Have a conversation.
We'd love to know, and we would love to know more. And I know, Dave's been doing this too. We'd love to know more about the obstacles. We've been, we came back. Again, NBI was very, very, very kind to support our research abroad, and we came back very enthusiastic. We showed all these examples at World of Modular, which was well approved at MHBA's meetings. But at the end of the day, I felt like folks were just tenuous. They, partly because of cost, partly because of time. We're doing this well. On the one hand, we like what we're doing. On the other hand, we're scared because the next recession is coming, and we have very, very, very tight profit margins. So we don't have time to do these things. And I think, I think the dollars and cents of why you collect data, it shouldn't be a luxury. It shouldn't be high tech. It shouldn't be something complicated. The first question is really to understand the value of data collection and what you need to track and how. And so, but yeah, I think that's for another discussion. But I think it's an important question. I think it's a step. Without knowing that, we won't have regulatory change. We won't be able to adopt automation or technology. We won't even know why certain products that are already out there, certain kinds of technologies, certain kinds of automation techniques, why are they even valuable? Why is it that Europeans use panelization as a step to volumetricization? I think the data would tell you better than the technology.
Yeah, sure. Well, you know what? I think just like me, you got to hit me over the head every day with it, 6 days a week, and drill it in until people finally go, that's why I do it. So maybe we'll have a show 6 days a week on data. I might lose the rest of my hair though if I did that. So, all right, let's wrap up here. So, Andrew Seeley says offsite makes sense, especially for an overall industry in transition. Absolutely. Osama Alabi, good to see you, Osama. Collaboration just makes the cake larger for everyone. That's what we've been saying. I love it. Absolutely. Joel Hutchinson, link data. The key is to link data between stakeholders. Absolutely agree. Oh, Jennifer made a comment on Osama Alabi. Osama Alabi, it isn't a cake or a pie, it's a candle. Use your candle to light another one and we'll become more luminescent by working together.
Cakes and candles, they go well together.
They do go well together. I love it. I love it. Anthony Goudet. Hey, Anthony. Ivan Rupnik is working on the data collections or establishing metrics. Now, Anthony, I thought I saw a comment up above. Let me just make sure I get that. I agree that it comes down to understanding the value proposition, both from a system and collaboration standpoint. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we are working. We've been working with MBI on at least working with their sort of industry-wide data. But I think what Dave brought up, it's the two would benefit each other. I think one is industry-wide data, understanding the market, but really it's understanding your own, especially for manufacturers, but for builders as well. I think understanding your day-to-day, it's just something when industry, that kind of capital-intensive nature of manufacturing requires.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, I got one more comment, and then we're going to call it quits because I think this will go forever. Everybody likes you. All right, Anthony Goudet. I think it needs to be both, creating a framework for data and metrics from the entire supply chain to finished building on site.
Yes.
This is a great conversation, Ivan. I know I have some other people. There's been a lot of likes, and I really appreciate everybody joining us today. What you got any words of wisdom for those in the offsite world, Ivan, other than collect data and collaborate?
It's never been a better time to be involved in offsite construction. Really, it's true.
Yeah, I agree.
It's been a tough 100 years. So
yeah. Oh, you know what we have to do? Let's tell them about your free seminar before we get out of here. Let me put that up here.
Oh,
right.
So
got the banner across.
Yes, please. So on Thursday, we will be doing a sort of a preview / surrogate of our Sweden exchange. So we're going to be speaking with Suzanne Rudenstam, who is the head of the Swedish Timber Association, really the head lobby group for advancing offsite and wood construction in Sweden, and Helena Liedlow, who's the head engineer of Lindbäcks, which is really one of the most impressive multifamily volumetric manufacturers, builders, fully integrated companies we've seen in the world. So we're going to be speaking, Ryan Smith and myself are going to be speaking with them and with whoever wants to join our discussion on this Thursday. The link is in the banner, and also I think somewhere else in the links. It's also on modx.network, which is our website. So please join us on Thursday. And those two very, very smart people are going to tell us a lot about what's going on in Sweden, which is something everyone should know a little more about than they do.
I love it. So you heard that. Everybody needs to join. Ivan, this has been wonderful, man. I kept you for an hour. I'm a little over on time, but this has been an awesome conversation. I hope we get you back again soon.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for some great questions.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. And remember, we are now 1 p.m. Monday through Friday. You never have to guess again, 1 p.m. And you will get tired of me, I promise. But we'll continue to bring you smart, innovative thinkers like Ivan each week so we can change the way we build. There's a smarter way of doing it. And Ivan's one of the guys that knows how to make that happen. So, Ivan, thanks so much.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye now.